Agatha Christie, the witness for the prosecution, Part 2. He was seriously disturbed by the way the thing was shaping. The Voles lived in a small shabby house near Paddington Green. It was to this house that Mr. Mayherne went. In answer to his ring, a big slatternly woman, obviously a chairwoman, answered the door. "Mrs. Vole? Has she returned yet?" "Got back an hour ago, but I don't know if you can see her." "If you will take my card to her," said Mr. Mayherne quietly, "I am quite sure that she will do so." The woman looked at him doubtfully, wiped her hand on her apron, and took the card. Then she closed the door in his face and left him on the step outside. In a few minutes, however, she returned with a slightly altered manner. "Come inside, please." She ushered him into a tiny drawing room. Mr. Mayherne, examining a drawing on the wall, stared up suddenly to face a tall, pale woman who had entered so quietly that he had not heard her. "Mr. Mayherne? Are you my husband's solicitor, are you not? You have come from him? Will you please sit down?" Until she spoke, he had not realized that she was not English. Now, observing her more closely, he noticed the high cheekbones, the dense blue black of the hair, and an occasional very slight movement of the hands that was distinctly foreign. A strange woman, very quiet. So quiet as to make one uneasy. From the very first, Mr. Mayherne was conscious that he was up against something that he did not understand. "Now, my dear Mrs. Vole," he began, "you must not give way." He stopped. It was so very obvious that Romaine Vole had not the slightest intention of giving way. She was perfectly calm and composed. "Will you please tell me all about it?" she said. "I must know everything. Do not think to spare me. I want to know the worst." She hesitated, then repeated in a lower tone, with a curious emphasis which the lawyer did not understand. "I want to know the worst." Mr. Mayherne went over his interview with Leonard Vole. She listened attentively, nodding her head now and then. "I see," she said, when he had finished. "He wants me to say that he came in at 20 minutes past 9 that night?" "He did come in at that time?" said Mr. Mayherne sharply. "That is not the point," she said coldly. "Will my saying so acquit him? Will they believe me?" Mr. Mayherne was taken aback. She had gone so quickly to the core of the matter. That is what I want to know," she said. "Will it be enough? Is there anyone else who can support my evidence?" There was a suppressed eagerness in her manner that made him vaguely uneasy. "So far there is no one else," he said reluctantly. "I see," said Romaine Vole. She sat for a minute or two perfectly still. A little smile played over her lips. The lawyer's feeling of alarm grew stronger and stronger. "Mrs. Vole," he began, "I know what you must feel." "Do you?" she said. "I wonder." In the circumstances, I intend to play a lone hand." He looked at her in dismay. "But my dear Mrs. Vole, you are overwrought. Being so devoted to your husband—" "I beg your pardon?" The sharpness of her voice made him start. He repeated in a hesitating manner, being so devoted to your husband?" Romaine Vole nodded slowly, the same strange smile on her lips. "Did he tell you that I was devoted to him?" she asked softly. "Oh, yes, I can see he did. How stupid men are. Stupid, stupid, stupid." She rose suddenly to her feet. All the intense emotion that the lawyer had been conscious of in the atmosphere was now concentrated in her tone. "I hate him, I tell you. I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. I would like to see him hanged by the neck till he is dead." The lawyer recoiled before her and the smoldering passion in her eyes. She advanced a step nearer and continued vehemently, "Perhaps I shall see it. Supposing I tell you that he did not come in that night at 9:20, but at 10:20. You say that he tells you that he knew nothing about the money coming to him. Supposing I tell you he knew all about it and counted on it and committed murder to get it. Supposing I tell you that he admitted to me that night when he came in what he had done, that there was blood on his coat. What then? Supposing that I stand up in court and say all these things." Her eyes seemed to challenge him. With an effort, he concealed his growing dismay and endeavored to speak in a rational tone. "You cannot be asked to give evidence against your own husband." "He is not my husband." The words came out so quickly that he fancied he had misunderstood her. "I beg your pardon, he is not my husband." The silence was so intense that you could have heard a pin drop. "I was an actress in Vienna. My husband is alive, but in a madhouse, so we could not marry. I am glad now." She nodded defiantly. "I should like you to tell me one thing," said Mr. Mayherne. He contrived to appear as cool and unemotional as ever. "Why are you so bitter against Leonard Vole?" She shook her head, smiling a little. "Yes, you would like to know, but I shall not tell you. I will keep my secret." Mr. Mayherne gave his dry little cough and rose. "There seems no point in prolonging this interview," he remarked. "You will hear from me again after I have communicated with my client." She came closer to him, looking into his eyes with her own wonderful dark ones. "Tell me," she said, "did you believe, honestly, that he was innocent when you came here today?" "I did," said Mr. Mayherne. "You poor little man," she laughed. "And I believe so still," finished the lawyer. "Good evening, madam." He went out of the room, taking with him the memory of her startled face. "This is going to be the devil of a business," said Mr. Mayherne to himself as he strode along the street. "Extraordinary, the whole thing. An extraordinary woman, a very dangerous woman. Women were the devil when they got their knife into you." What was to be done? That wretched young man hadn't a leg to stand upon. Of course, possibly he did commit the crime. "No," said Mr. Mayherne to himself. "No, there's almost too much evidence against him. I don't believe this woman. She was trumping up the whole story, but she'll never bring it to court." He wished he felt more conviction on the point. The police court proceedings were brief and dramatic. The principal witness for the prosecution were Janet Mackenzie, maid to the dead woman, and Romaine Heilger, Austrian subject, the mistress of the prisoner. Mr. Mayherne sat in the court and listened to the damning story that the latter told. It was on the lines she had indicated to him in the interview. The prisoner reserved his defense and was committed for trial. Mr. Mayhern was at his wits' end. The case against Leonard Vole was black beyond words. Even the famous K.C. who was engaged for the defense held out little hope. "If we can shake that Austrian woman's testimony, we might do something," he said dubiously, "but it's a bad business." Mr. Mayhern had concentrated his energies on one single point. Assuming Leonard Vole to be speaking the truth, and to have left the murdered woman's house at 9 o'clock, who was the man whom Janet heard talking to Miss French at 9:30? The only ray of light was in the shape of a scapegrace nephew who had in bygone days cajoled and threatened his aunt out of various sums of money. Janet Mackenzie, the solicitor learned, had always been attached to this young man, and had never ceased urging his claims upon his mistress. It certainly seems possible that it was this nephew who had been with Miss French after Leonard Vole left, especially as he was not to be found in any of his old haunts. In all directions, the lawyer's researches had been negative in their result. No one had seen Leonard Vole entering his own house or leaving that of Miss French. No one had seen any other man enter or leave the house in Cricklewood. All inquiries drew a blank. It was the eve of the trial when Mr. Mayhern received the letter which was to lead his thoughts in an entirely new direction. It came by 6 o'clock post, an illiterate scrawl, written on common paper and enclosed in a dirty envelope with the stamp stuck on crookedly. Mr. Mayhern read it through once or twice before he grasped its meaning. "Dear Mister, you're the lawyer chap what acts for the young feller. If you want that painted foreign hussy showed up for what she is and her pack of flies, you come to 16 Shawn's Rent, Stepney tonight. It'll cost you 200 quid, asked for Mrs. Mogson." The solicitor read and reread this strange epistle. It might, of course, be a hoax, but when he thought it over, he became increasingly convinced that it was genuine, and also convinced that it was the one hope for the prisoner. The evidence of Romain Heilgard damned him completely, and the line the defense meant to pursue, the line that the evidence of a woman who had admittedly lived an immoral life was not to be trusted, was at best a weak one. Mr. Mayhern's mind was made up. It was his duty to save his client at all costs. He must go to Shawn's Rents. He had some difficulty in finding the place, a ramshackle building in an evil-smelling slum, but at last he did so, and on inquiry for Mrs. Mogson, he was sent up to a room on the 3rd floor. On this door he knocked, and getting no answer, knocked again. At the second knock he heard a shuffling sound inside, and presently the door was opened cautiously, half an inch, and a bent figure peered out. Suddenly the woman, for it was a woman, gave a chuckle and opened the door wider. "So it's you, dearie," she said in a wheezy voice. "Nobody with you, is there? No playing tricks? That's right. You can come in. With some reluctance, the lawyer stepped across the threshold into the small, dirty room, with its flickering gas jet. There was an untidy, unmade bed in a corner, a plain deal table, and 2 rickety chairs. For the first time, Mr. Mayhern had a full view of of the tenant of this unsavory apartment. She was a woman of middle age, bent in figure, with a mass of untidy gray hair and a scarf wound tightly round her face. She saw him looking at this and laughed again, the same curious toneless chuckle. "Wondering why I hide my beauty, dear? A friend may tempt you, eh? But you shall see, you shall see." She drew aside the scarf, and the lawyer recoiled involuntarily before the almost formless blur of scarlet. She replaced the scarf again. "So you're not wanting to kiss me, dearie? I don't wonder. And yet I was a pretty girl once, not so long ago as you'd think either. Vitriol, dearie, vitriol. That's what did that. But I'll be even with them." She burst into a hideous torrent of profanity which Mr. Mayhern tried vainly to quell. She fell silent at last, her hands clenching and unclenching themselves nervously. "Enough of that," said the lawyer sternly. "I've come here because I have reason to believe you can give me information which will clear my client, Leonard Vole. Is that the case?" Her eye leered at him cunningly. "What about the money, dearie?" she wheezed. 200 quid, you remember. "It is your duty to give evidence, and you can be called upon to do so." "That won't do, dearie. I'm an old woman. I know nothing. But you give me 200 quid, and perhaps I can give you a hint or two. See?" "What kind of hint?" "What should you say to a letter? A letter from her. Never mind now how I got hold of it. That's my business. It'll do the trick. But I want my 200 quid. Mr. Mayhern looked at her coldly and made up his mind. "I'll give you £10, nothing more. And only that if this letter is what you say it is." £10? She screamed and raved at him. 20, said Mr. Mayhern, and that's my last word. He rose as if to go. Then, watching her closely, he drew out a pocket-book and counted out 21-pound notes. "You see," he said, "that is all I have with me. You can take it or leave it." But already he knew that the sight of the money was too much for her. She cursed and raved impotently, but at last she gave in. Going over to the bed, she drew something out from beneath the tattered mattress. "Here you are, damn you," she snarled. "It's the top one you want." It was a bundle of letters that she threw to him, and Mr. Mayhern untied them and scanned them in his unusual, cool, methodical manner. The woman, watching him eagerly, could gain no clue from his impassive face. He read each letter through, then returned again to the top one and read it a second time. Then he tied the whole bundle up again carefully. They were love letters written by Romain Hilger, and the man they were written to was not Leonard Vole. The top letter was dated the day of the letter's arrest. "I spoke true, dearie, didn't I?" whined the woman. "It will do for her, that letter." Mr. Mayhern put the letters in his pocket. Then he asked a question. "How did you get hold of this correspondence?" "That's telling," she said with a leer. "But I know something more. I heard in court what that hussy said. Find out where she was at 10:20, the time she says she was at home. Ask at the Lion Road Cinema. They'll remember. A fine, upstanding girl like that? Curse her." "Who is the man?" asked Mr. Mayhern. There's only a Christian name here." The other's voice grew thick and hoarse. Her hands clenched and unclenched. Finally, she lifted one to her face. "He's the man that did this to me many years ago. She took him away from me, a chit of a girl she was then. And when I went after him and went for him too, he threw the cursed stuff at me, and she laughed, damn her. I've had it in here for her for years. Followed her, I have, spied upon her. And now I've got her. She'll suffer for this, won't she, Mr. Lawyer? She'll suffer. She will probably be sentenced to a term of imprisonment for perjury, said Mr. Mayhern quietly. Shut away. That's what I want. You're going, are you? Where's my money? Where's the good money? Without a word, Mr. Mayhern put down the notes on the table. Then, drawing up a deep breath, he returned and left the squalid room. Looking back, he saw the old woman crooning over the money. So, this is the end of today's reading. See you again for the part 3. Bye-bye.